If you are viewing this PowerPoint, then you have successfully completed the Start Here module and have successfully unlocked the remaining course content. Throughout the course, you will see a series of PowerPoints. These PowerPoints are lectures to help you understand or clarify content for the course. The textbook in which I will be lecturing from is called Small Groups in Counseling by Barbara Postuma. The textbook is not required, as I have supplied all of the content needed for this course. Tonight, we'll take a look at the history of group counseling. In this history, we'll look at some prominent figures that are responsible for developing groups or groups as they are today. We'll also look at the developmental period of group counseling, the advantages of having a group versus individual counseling. We'll actually even define what are counseling groups. From there, we'll cover a couple of serious terms that you really need to be aware of for testing purposes. And then we'll take a look at one other prominent figure, Irvine Yalom, who came up with 10 categories of therapeutic factors. Now let's take a look at a series of historians that are responsible for developing groups as we know them today. Rather than to bore you with a lot of information or overkill, I'll just give you guys the basic summarization of what they contributed. Prior to these historians, groups were mostly used as more of an educational group for in a hospital setting. So Charles Cooley came along. He was a researcher, and he defined groups as a primary group that can be used as face-to-face, primarily involved with intimate, serious cooperation. So again, prior to Cooley, groups were more or less educational type groups where people came, received information, and then left. But with his understanding, groups can be used as face-to-face groups. We can have serious, intimate cooperation. So again, Charles Cooley defined the concept, primary group as being face-to-face. After Cooley, Joseph Pratt came along, or about the same time. Pratt was a Boston internist, and he said, yes, groups can be used for intimate, serious cooperation like Cooley. Nonetheless, he said, hey, these groups can be used to promote change. They can be used for education, but they can also be used for support as well. Pratt was one of the first guys to come along to realize the therapeutic value and member interactions that are within groups. So again, Joseph Pratt, Boston internist, stated that groups can be used to promote change. Kurt Lewin, a social psychologist, he's the founder of what we call modern group dynamics. Lewin took what Pratt said to the next level. He said, hey, these groups can also be used as agents of change. If you place a person in these groups, this group is more than likely going to be an agent that's going to change this person. Lewin is responsible for sensitivity groups. Groups such as caring, trust, and feedback were encouraged and shared by members in his groups. Lewin also came up with the term or statement, it is easier to change individuals formed into a group than to change any one of them separately. So basically, Lewin says, yes, you can do all individual counseling you like. However, if you stick these individuals in a group, you're going to reach more individuals and you're more likely to have success in changing their lives. Kurt Lewin, founder of Modern Group Dynamics, groups could be used as agents of change, and responsible for sensitivity groups. Kurt Lewin. As group development and group formation took root across the United States, J.L. Moreno came on board. Moreno organized the first society of group therapists he called Group Psychotherapy. He also developed the first professional journal on group therapy. This journal would allow various teachers across the country to kind of focus and be up to date on the current material and current practices. Moreno also is known for coining the term psychodrama. Psychodrama is known as action that brought about mental and emotional catharsis which in turn relieve tension. We'll talk about catharsis a little bit later. Nonetheless, catharsis is an overwhelming emotional response that a person has never had before. A lot of times it comes across as a wailing cry or just loud admittance of, man, I've been so horrible. And once a person reaches that point, that then relieves tension in their life and they can then make appropriate and better decisions. G.L. Moreno organized the first professional journal, and he coined the term psychodrama. Now that we've discussed those four historians, you should be able to see a subtle change in the formation and development of groups across the United States. These developments can be separated into two parts. Basically, from the 1930s through the 1960s was during the time period in which these changes took place. And this period has two different trends. The first trend, groups are widely used as treatment for patient populations. So at the beginning of the developmental period, groups are only used in a hospital settings, and they were only used for patients dealing with certain issues. Take, for example, a group of individuals that had cancer. These individuals were called into the hospital. They were all sitting and gathering in a certain location, and there was a doctor or someone to educate them on the history of cancer, background of cancer, treatments of cancer. And so that was only a patient population group of individuals that were targeted. The second trend, once these historians came along, groups were then used for personal growth and preservation. During this time period was also when groups such as AA, Alcoholics Anonymous, came along. These were those type of support groups in which sharing was encouraged, disclosing, talking to one another, listening to one another, supporting and learning from one another was also during this second trend. So the developmental period took place over a 30-year period between the 1930s and 1960s, and there were two different trends during this time period. So as groups formed and developed, there was still a separation in the various types of groups out there. There were still education groups, there were still support groups going on, but you guys will be participating in counseling groups. The main purpose of a counseling group is to bring about change in the individual or the individuals that are participating in that group. Typically, your group name will indicate the purpose of the group. If it's a alcohol recovery group, that's usually going to be the name. If it's an anger management group, if it's a coping skills or this decision-making group, usually the group name will indicate the purpose of the group. The members will be confronted with pressure from other members to change their behaviors and their views. That is your responsibility to know. Actually, that's an ethical responsibility for you to be aware of the members being confronted with pressures. And we'll talk about more of those pressures as we progress through these slides. There are 5 advantages of having a counseling group. Number one is the feeling of belonging. That deals with the alienation that I'm the only one that's dealing with this issue. Being around others with the same problem, that will also help and be an advantage to members in the group. Being able for members to compare their struggles, their techniques of dealing with those issues, and their behaviors to other members in group is a definite advantage for members participating in a group. Having group support, other than an individual just going and having a counselor for support, having the entire group and everyone in that group as a support and a network is also very important and is an advantage. And finally, for the counselor, a group saves time and it saves money for you as well. So counseling groups, these are advantages for you to be aware of. Pratt and Lewin both stated that groups can be used to promote change. Let's take a look at what causes this change to take place in individuals. There's a term to be familiar with called group dynamics. Group dynamics, in its rawest definition, is simply the forces that are operating in a group. These forces may occur in many different ways, in many different forms, but this is a simple list of several that you should be aware of. Nonverbal behavior. Nonverbal behavior are those behaviors that are taking place that are not verbal, as it states. Be aware of your members' eye contact. Be aware of their posture. Be aware of their arms. Are they crossed? Are they uncrossed? Are they rolling their eyes? Do they have a smirk on their face? Are their legs crossed or not? Are they looking away? Are they avoiding eye contact? Nonverbals will give you an astoundingly amount of information on your group members. Communication patterns. What are the patterns that are taking place within your group? Does Susie always follow Jared when Jared talks? Does Mike always smirk or roll his eyes when Jared talks? Communication patterns are very important. Is there a member that's always argumentative? Is there a certain member that is always interrupting everyone else? Communication patterns are very important, and you have to understand those as well. Levels of participation. Now, this varies and changes over groups from session to session and throughout the group process itself. Members will participate happily and excitedly on certain topics, and in other topics, they may be a little bit more withdrawn. So, what are the participation levels? What's prompting members to not want to participate that night? Be aware of the level of participation as a dynamic as well. Expression of feelings. Some people just simply don't know how to express themselves. They've not been allowed, whether that's at home, they've been shunned or told to be quiet, or they just simply never learned that skill in life itself. Expression of feelings, be sure that you are always modeling the appropriate manner and appropriate method to express yourself, and that way the members can learn that skill as well. But that is definitely a dynamic to be aware of. Resistance. Are the members resisting a certain topic? Are they just being resistant because something else is going on in their lives? Or someone in group may have said something that they just flat out disagree with? Are they resisting? And which also brings on the next dynamic, avoidance. Are they avoiding a certain topic for a reason? Maybe they relapse. Maybe the topic that you're talking about that night may be something that member is currently struggling with in life. And so they're bringing out the negative aspects. So they're avoiding. So these forces are called group dynamics. They're always going on and taking place in group. You, as a facilitator, particularly as a licensed facilitator, have to be aware of these dynamics because they will speak directly to your ethical responsibility of protecting against psychological risks in group. In conjunction with group dynamics, another term to be familiar with is group process. Group process is simply the interactive patterns that develop at different times in a group. So take a look at your group, be familiar with the patterns that are taking place, whether that could be communication patterns, that could be just behavioral patterns within your group. But nonetheless, interactive patterns are considered group process. So just to summarize the two, what are the differences in group dynamics and group process? Group dynamics are simply the forces that are operating in the group, and group process are the patterns that are occurring within the group. So this looks like a matching question to me. Group dynamics, forces, group process, patterns. For group process, just remember P with P, process with patterns. Now that you guys have an understanding of the differences between group dynamics and group process, let's throw in one more element, therapeutic factors. In 1985, Irvine Yalom came up with these terms. Therapeutic factors are considered curative factors, elements within a group that can actually help basically cure a person. He states that these factors are operating at all times within a group. They're interdependents that may represent conditions for change, while others are mechanisms for change. So basically what that means is Yalom states that if you place a person in group, this individual just being in a group setting itself is going to set them up for change. And he says if that's not enough, just with them being in group, these factors taking place and with the interaction that's taking place, These are mechanisms that the person can learn that will also help them change. So let's take a look at the 10 therapeutic factors that Yalam states are always operating within group. The first therapeutic factor is imparting of information, simply sharing. Sharing depends on the type of group that you're having. Sharing depends on you as the leader or facilitator. And sharing also depends on the members that are within the group. Different types of sharing includes giving advice, offering suggestions, providing guidance, interpretations, and instructions. All of this sharing comes from the leader as well as the members in the group. Be careful not to make group as a class. As a leader, you're going to be extremely tempted to start lecturing. Do not do that. Group is not about you. Group is about the members. So allow the members opportunity to talk and share information. Nonetheless, you should just facilitate and act as a guide. One issue with you giving too much information, it could foster dependence. Simply meaning, or simply stated, the members start depending on you. They come to group just to hear you talk. And that's no longer counseling. That is more of a support group. So impartive information is the first therapeutic factor that is always operating in a counseling group. The second therapeutic factor is installation of hope. Remember, your members are 9 times out of 10 in a downward spiral in their lives. They have no hope. They're feeling helpless, hopeless, and they have no focus or guidance. Therefore, your members must see your group as being helpful and hopeful to them. 9 times out of 10, this depends on your ability to personalize group and to get that individual to see that it is important for them to come. Simple stories, general examples from your knowledge and your schema should be able to hook in those clients to have a clear understanding that, wow, this group is actually helpful. A prime example, you can ask a simple question to the group and just state, how many of you guys have wants this to stop? And 9 times out of 10, most of them will. Okay, so what have you tried? And you just kind of go around the group and get each of them to explain what they've already tried in order to stop this addiction that they're dealing with. And then there's usually some person that has a thought that's like, well, I could still do it on my own. Or I don't need this. Only my probation officer's making me come. And what I've done in the past is just try to get them to focus on their family. If they have children, you can just pose a simple question of, so if you continue on this path that you're going, where are you going to end up? And of course, obviously, they're going to end up strung out on drugs or in jail or in the hospital from an overdose. Pose a scenario to them. So you're at home, you're getting high, you're not thinking about what's going on, and your kid walks in the door and you're laying on the floor hemorrhaging with a needle in your arm. That's personalizing it. That's an example to where every member can take that scenario, place themselves in that scenario, and place their child or family member in that scenario. And that a lot of times is enough to get them motivated to say, wow, this group I need to come to make this change. So just simple examples like that you'll learn over your history and over your experiences of group counseling or individual counseling that will help you try to personalize a group setting to each individual while doing it all at once. In open groups, new members will feed off of old members' participation and willingness to share. Now, there's usually 2 types of group. There's an open group and a closed group. A closed group is very simple. This group starts on Wednesday. We will meet once a week for the next 8 Wednesdays. And at that final Wednesday, on the 8th setting, this group is over. Those are closed groups. They're very defined. This is a start date. This is the end date. Now, in open group, there's a start date. You started that group or a prior counselor has started that group a year ago or years ago. And this group meets every Wednesday, but there's no ending to that group. That's considered an open group. As new members enter that group, they will look at members that have been there, the more senior members, and look at their sharing. So if you have senior members that are kind of more reserved and not talking very much, the new members will feed off of that and they will not talk. So make sure you're facilitating and running your groups and have a really good relationship with your senior members, because those new members will feed off of them in their willingness to share. Leaders can and should point out changes of improvement to assist in offering hope. You have to be able to point out to your members that they are progressing and making changes. Hey, Sally, I remember 3 weeks ago, we were talking about this topic and you just said you could not deal with it. It's so much stress for you. But tonight, look at the example that you gave. You were able to deal with that person without getting upset, without blowing your lid. And that's progress. That's really good. So be able to point out changes in your group and in each individual in that group to show and to instill hope that they can deal with this addiction. One of the oldest tactics of war, divide and conquer. If you can divide an enemy, you can conquer that enemy. If you can divide an individual from the rest of their family or the rest of their support system, then that drug will conquer them. Universality is the third therapeutic factor. The feeling of belonging with others who share the same problem. If members in group can support one another and they're into the group is helpful and they're receiving hope from that group, then universality will come into play. Each member has different and unique problems. Nonetheless, universality deals with that I'm the only one syndrome. When the members are feeling and they're so embarrassed that I'm the only one doing this, I should be able to overcome this on my own. This is ridiculous. I'm a grown adult and I still am struggling with this after all these years. Universality deals with that. Universality provides a feeling of unity. It provides a bonding for those individuals. Members' disclosure will provide a sense of similarity. So the more your members are talking and sharing, and they're going around and opening up, telling about what's going on in their lives, that will provide or aid in the universality as well. Universality, the third therapeutic factor. The next therapeutic factor is altruism. Altruism is simply members helping each other. Altruism strengthens trust in the group. The more the members support and help one another, the more that the trust is strengthened. Altruism allows for feedback. It allows for reassurance, suggestions, and support for one another. Usually, group members offer support and caring to one another, not you as a facilitator, because remember, you do not want to foster dependence where they look for you to offer support. You also have to be aware of that and cautious of that in individual counseling, but nonetheless, we're talking about this in the group setting. Altruism, members helping each other. Because of the imparting of information, installation of hope, universality, and altruism, your group is now starting to bond, thus providing appropriate and ripe conditions for family reenactment, our fifth therapeutic factor. The group bond allows members to see what they do not have in their families. Many of these family members are not allowed to just have that bond, so the group situation will fill that need. Many members will have a poor, unsatisfactory family experience. So family reenactment is a step of therapeutic factors that will allow members to see that. Role playing will allow members to learn new ways of dealing with and relating to members of their families. You can role play by using the struggling member as the subject in the role play, or you can allow the struggling member to just kind of sit back and other members can pretend to deal with a situation or scenario that's similar to one that struggling member has already mentioned, thus allowing the family reenactment to strengthen and provide the struggling member with an avenue of understanding what's going on. Family reenactment via role play is our fifth therapeutic factor. Because of the unsatisfactory family experiences, many members will lack adequate social skills, which brings us to our sixth therapeutic factor, development of socializing techniques. Feedback to members provide the opportunity for members to learn about behaviors that they did not know exist or that will prompt certain responses. Socializing technique also helps members to develop a close personal relationship. It allows them to learn how to speak and to talk to others without yelling and screaming and getting their points across. Many members will have the issue of they know what they want to say and it's stuck in their head. They just don't know how to get it out. So, development of socializing technique allows them to practice in a safe setting to be able to learn how to communicate and take those thoughts from their heads and translate those into words. Role playing is a good technique for this. It's a good technique for teaching social skills, placing the person in a scenario that's extremely stressful and allowing them to practice in the group setting of how to express and get their feelings out in an appropriate manner. Development of socializing techniques are a sixth therapeutic factor. Our next therapeutic factor, imitative behavior. You as a facilitator, you as a licensed professional counselor are always being watched. Never forget that. You are always to model, you are always to not blow your lid and be able to communicate appropriately and demonstrate that to your clients in the group setting. Even when your group is attacking you, you still need to remain calm and cool and present imitative behavior. Members will observe each other, they will observe you as well, but they will become aware of behaviors that evoke a positive and behaviors that evoke negative responses. Some of them want negative responses because they really don't want to be in group and they really want to be placed out of group, but their probation officer or the judge has mandated that they come. But if you place them out of group, that's a green light. But if they leave group, they'll get locked up. So imitative behavior, be sure that you are showing the appropriate behavior and be sure that you're aware of the responses that the members are making between one another. Usually behaviors that receive a positive response are repeated and then learning can occur. So be positive with your clients, be positive with the members in the group. Therefore, they will learn to repeat those behaviors. At this point, the majority of you should have already taken Intro to Psychology and you study Pavlov. Pavlov had those salivating dogs that when he rang a bell, they would start salivating over a period of time because they realize when they hear that bell sound, dinner's coming. They're going to get some kind of snack. Humans, we're exactly the same. Here's a prime example. If you have a child and your child is sitting up and they're watching this television show and it's about 7:30 or 8 at night, you look in the kitchen to see the dishes are still there. And you say, Johnny, go do the dishes. Okay, mom. Yeah, sure. I'll do the dishes. Let me wait for a commercial. And you're like, okay, sure. 30 minutes later, you walk back in and the dishes are still there. Now, we all know that there's a commercial usually every 5 minutes on TV. So they've had at least 3 opportunities to take out the trash. So what do you do as a parent? You go over there and yell and scream to try to get the child to take out the trash. Well, a few days later, the same scenario plays out. You're done eating. Johnny, go take out the trash. I'll take it out, mom. Okay. So you leave. 30 minutes later, you walk back in. The trash has been taken out. What's a typical response to that adolescent or that child? It's about time. Yeah. But if you switch gears and say, hey, Johnny, I noticed you took out the trash. Man, I really appreciate that. Thanks a lot. Just that positive response is more likely to have that child repeat that behavior as opposed to, it's about time. Imitative behavior, an extremely important therapeutic factor. The eighth therapeutic factor is interpersonal learning, the ability to learn while interacting with others. Feedback allows for more productive ways of interacting. So the more feedback that you give or the group is providing, the more productive that the group probably will be. Trust and caring creates a safe environment, which allows members to try things differently. And we'll talk a little bit about a safe environment later, but you as a facilitator, you as a professional are responsible for creating that safe environment through rules and guidance and things of sort. Groups allow members the opportunity to explore their thinking patterns and their beliefs. So if you're providing that safe environment, they're going to try things different. They're going to explore and they're going to ask questions in that group. So as they interact with one another, that promotes and increases their ability to learn from one another. Interpersonal learning, the eighth therapeutic factor. So as we've been progressing through these therapeutic factors, you've noticed that I've mentioned bonding quite a bit. The technical term for bonding is cohesion. Cohesion is the unity, the bonding, the we-ness, the loyalty that the members have to the group. This bonding or this cohesion fluctuates over time. Cohesion will fluctuate over topic, and it will fluctuate over circumstances, whatever's going on in that person or the group members' lives. Cohesion, the unity, bonding, and we-ness is definitely a therapeutic factor that you want to strive for in your group. During times of high unity is when members will express and explore themselves. When there's low cohesion, that's a time period when the group will probably fight or struggle to deal with or reach their goals. So cohesion in its rarest definition is the unity, the bonding, the we-ness of the group. Cohesion, our ninth therapeutic factor. Let's jump over to a little caveat of cohesion. 7 constructs of group cohesion. Constructs are basically characteristics. So these can be labeled as 7 characteristics of group cohesion. Commonality. The group will feel they all have something in common, whether that's the struggle or the poor decision makings or the addiction itself. Commonality is a construct that the members will all share and feel. Sharing problems. They will all share their problems. They will all be open to sharing, not leaving one person out, but everyone in that group will be participating in sharing. The group will gain support is another characteristic. You will see over time the progression of support as opposed to you offering suggestions. The 1 or 2 group members will step out and start offering suggestions and feedback. And then before you know it, the entire group is supporting one another. The group will talk freely. It will seem like it's no longer a group. It just seems like it's more of a discussion topic. And the group just flows. And before you know it, the hour and a half has passed and group is over. The group will talk freely when cohesion is high. Getting in touch with their emotions, they will be really in tune and in touch with their emotions, and they will be able to express that, taking those thoughts from their head and sharing those. Receiving feedback. They will be open to receiving feedback from all the members in group. There will not be one particular person that's offering and giving feedback. It will be the entire group sharing and providing feedback with one another. And then the final characteristic of group cohesion is gaining confidence. They will become more and more confident at reaching their individual goals as well as their group goal. 7 constructs or characteristics of group cohesion. Our 10th and final therapeutic factor is catharsis. Catharsis is an expression of strong emotions. An example of catharsis would be perhaps you've been at a funeral in the past and the procession is taking place. People may be going up to view the individual, and all of a sudden someone just starts wailing as loud as they can. They're crying, they're really upset, they're screaming, perhaps they collapse. That's an overwhelming expression of emotions and feelings. That is catharsis. Catharsis usually hasn't been expressed before. So in your members, you may have a person in group that all of a sudden just starts crying and they're down in themselves. They just calling themselves a horrible person. We kind of call it a breakthrough in counseling. Society sees this as a sign of weakness. You know, you're weak, you're crying, you're upset, you can't handle it. But a group sees that as a strengthening time. They sees that as this person is breaking, they're done with that past, they're ready to move on, they're ready to start learning. Catharsis. Members feeling comfortable getting things off their chest, yet still being accepted and still being respected. Catharsis, an emotional expression of feelings, our 10th and final therapeutic factor.